I'm Beth Johnson, and I'm the Special Population Supervisor with the Peters Township Park and Recreation Department. In the last year, I have had the special joy of working with senior citizens in Peters Township. And today, a group of them have met me at Erma Grego's house. Erma, thank you very much for having us. I'd like to introduce my friends. Starting over on my right, we have Mary Webster and Alice Coeffield and Sophie and her husband George Sepelak, Erma, our hostess, and Sam Grivnow. We thought that we would get together today to jog some memories, to talk about what it was like years ago in Peters Township. And I think that before we get started, I would like to ask each of you to say something a little about yourself, how long you've been in Peters Township, and maybe a little bit of information about where you lived when you first arrived in Peters. So we'll start over with Mary.
Well, my parents moved to Peters Township when I was 10 years old. We moved in over on Bell Drive, right across from the entrance to the middle school, behind the Bell Telephone Building. My father built a house there in 1932 and 33. I guess it took longer to build a house then. And we moved in on March 31st, 1957. I'm sorry, 1933. So that means I've been here 57 years.
Okay. Alice?
I was born at Donaldson's Crossroads 60 years ago, and I still reside at the Crossroads on Meadow Street. And my family has lived there in the same house for 100 and, well, my mother's still living in the same house, but it's been in the same family for 105 years. And I have spent my whole life there.
Great. Sophie or George?
You
Let's start with
Well, Soph probably will jog my memory. One thing about being elderly, we find that we don't exactly remember everything. But at any rate, we've been in Peters Township for, what, 36 years?
No, we've been here 41 years.
41
in July.
years. Oh, that's right. And I was 36 whenever we moved. That's right. And we live on Pleasant Avenue. There's been quite a bit of changes, of course. I think Mrs. Alice would know a lot more about Donaldson's Crossroads than we ever would. But one thing we did recall, there's only about, on Pleasant Avenue at that time, only about 7 or 8 homes actually. And in the course of time, things have, when the street was extended, one went up over the hill and so on. But going back to the family, we have 4 boys and 1 girl. And they're all doing on their own because they attended, 3 of them attended Carnegie Mellon, and Brian, the youngest, was getting shorter cash, so he went to University of Pittsburgh. Kathy, of course, went there for 1 year, and then she decided to go to New York. But at any rate, they all seem to be prospering, and the 2 of us are mostly at home at the present time.
Okay,
all right.
Okay, we moved here in, well, in 1925, what was on the Gillespie farm. It was on Thompsonville Road, and where the houses are now and everything, there was just a big barn, and the house is still there. And then we left for about 8 months, and then we came here in 27. And I've lived here ever since and raised my family and all.
Great. And Sam?
I've been here 33 years, and there's been a lot of changes in McMurray. I live in the McClinic plan, and I call this section here, I call that the McMurray Plaza, which very few people know that it exists because there's been so many changes there. Anything you want is right in the area.
Okay, and And how many years have you been here?
33 years.
33. Okay. Well, maybe as we talk, why don't we start with those of you that went to school in Peters Township. Now, a few of you did. I'd be real interested to hear some stories about where you went to school, just anything you can remember about your classroom or your teachers. Anybody?
Well, I started first grade at Wright School, which was down on Sugar Camp Road. As a matter of fact, my high school teacher is living in the house that I went to school in. And then that was when we lived over on the Gillespie farm. And then we moved over here, and I went to Bower Hill School, which is up on, and it's a family home now. And I remember going uphill was much harder than coming downhill for lunch, jumping over fences and everything to come home to eat and then to go back up to school. And then we went over to the high school. Well, then it was everything. The one they tore down just recently.
The old middle school.
The old middle
Okay.
school. Uh-huh. And there was the, from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade over there. And, well, I guess Mary and I both went over there whenever it was first opened.
Yeah. Well, I started 5th grade in September of 1933. And I had previously gone to Clifton, the old Clifton School in Upper St. Clair. We lived at that time on Hayes Road. I was born in a house that's still standing on Hayes Road. And anyway, when I started over to McMurray School, well, I want to backtrack a little bit because we moved in March. At that time, Peters Township let the elementary school out on April 30th. And, of course, in the 4th grade at Clifton School, we had to go till the end of May. So my father made arrangements for me to travel with Charlotte Wright back and forth to Clifton School until the end of the semester, or the end of the year. And the kids at school in Clifton thought I was crazy because I'd have a chance to get out on April 30th, and here I was going an extra month. But anyhow, I started 5th grade in McMurray School. At that time, it had 12 grades in one building. Probably about 250 people in the entire building. Now you have high school classes that are bigger than that.
That's true, just about.
But there were
That's
about 10 in our class in the 5th grade. And we had, one room had 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And Iris Biles, B-I-L-E-S, was our teacher. And that's about all I remember about starting over here anyhow. But I went through to the graduation, 1941, so.
And Alice, you went to a different school.
I went to Pleasant Valley School at the Crossroads, and it was a one-room schoolhouse with a coal stove in the center of it, and you went outside for the bathroom and for drinking water, and there was one teacher there, and it had been 8 grades, but when I started, it was 5 grades. And there was 2 of us in 1st grade, and a lot of times there was one, which was me, and I just sat on the teacher's lap to read. And we walked home for lunch. In the winter, we could take our sleds to school and sled ride at lunchtime because we had an hour for lunch. And we all had responsibility, though, at school. You were responsible, there were boys that were responsible to bring the coal in, to put the flag up. There was no, we didn't have a janitor. I was real happy in 4th grade. I became the janitor, and I remained the janitor until I was in 8th grade, although in 6th grade I went to the high school at McMurray, which was a grade school and a high school. And I graduated from there, and there was 28 in my class when I graduated.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's
How many we
fascinating.
had in our class? 28.
We had 22 in ours.
You mentioned when we went past on McMurray Road. They're not too far from the crossroads. The school is still standing.
The school is there. I
the
have a
building-
picture,
Veterinary
not a real
hospital.
good picture of it. I have a picture of the teacher, my first grade teacher, and the pupils standing on the steps of the school.
Oh, wonderful.
And
Was that Lucy McCombs?
Lucy McCombs was
Yeah.
my teacher, yes.
Is that the picture there?
Yes. I don't know if you want it right now. but-
Well,
Can she zoom in on it? No.
and that's at Pleasant Valley, which is at this point, what, an interior decorator
An
place
interior
now?
decorator
Yeah, with
place.
a veterinarian.
Yes, in the rear.
And there,
Yes.
we did not have a telephone. If that teacher would have had an emergency, she would have had to go to the neighbors. I mean, she was your nurse, everything, when you were at that school.
I wonder what kind of schooling she had to become a teacher.
Well, she came from Prosperity every morning.
That was quite a trip.
Goodness.
Yes, it was.
It's a long ride, yeah, especially those days.
Yes, it was. But she was always there, and have a lot of fond memories of things we did.
She later taught over at the high school.
Yes, when I went to 6th grade, she went too. She was my teacher again in
And
6th
same
grade.
way with Ora Horner down at the
Yes.
Thompsonville School.
Hmm.
Now, you three went to school here. Did you know each other when you were
Yes.
growing up?
Mhm. Yeah.
Everybody knew everybody else.
Everybody
Yes.
I guess. How many? Speaking of that, do you have any idea what the population was back in?
I don't.
I don't know, but you just knew about everybody
Knew.
in the township at one time.
Yeah.
Almost.
Mhm. As a matter of fact, every time, well, this was like in the 30s, I guess, whenever I'd drive up to, well, no, must have been in the 40s. I'd drive up to the bus stop and Mr. Horn used to always say, well, there goes that Menike girl again up there.
Well, what about transportation? Any memories of getting around places?
Well, I graduated from Kelsey Shannon grade school, and then I went to Mountain High School, and we used to, most of the time we had a nickel to ride the streetcar, and well, most of the time we'd walk to save that nickel, you know, because you could buy a big
Right.
Firehouse candy bar for a nickel.
Oh,
Yeah.
And I only missed 4 days out of 4 years of going to school. And I'll tell you one thing, the teachers back there, they were really, really kind and good to you.
Yes, they were.
They were, certainly.
how? I mean, how were they different than they might be now?
Well, I mean, they didn't like use, they treated you like you was a son or a daughter or something like that, you know.
I
They'd
bet
say,
you became very
how come you're
close.
making a C when you should make a B?
That's
I'd say,
right.
well, I'm passing with a C.
They probably took a special interest in you because the classes were smaller. And,
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
was it you, Rose, that said that, Alice, I mean,
You sat on her knee.
no,
Yeah.
that you, there was only one or two in
Yeah.
here. Well, that's the way it was up at Bower Hill, too. There was only like 2 in each grade.
And she would
And,
give, oh, excuse me, she would give you something to keep you busy while she was
Uh-huh.
working with the older classes.
And we always would listen to what was going on in the other classes and everything.
And another thing, they had the paddle, you know.
Yes,
You know,
they did.
that paddle.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure. I would think that you probably learned a lot from listening to the
Right.
older
You
classes.
They
did.
did. They
Mhm.
did.
Yeah.
You mentioned about transportation, but the, excuse me, the interurban, as they called it, that was a very fine method of transportation, as everyone has found out now when he goes to the South Hills, and they're complaining about a lack of parking. They should have kept that right-of-way open.
Now, where did it go?
It went all the way past, like, not too far from the
From
crossroads,
the
right
nursing
down the
home,
hill.
right there by the nursing home,
Right.
Mary Hills Nursing Home.
Right.
It went to Washington.
Yeah.
It went all the way to
Mhm.
Washington, PA from
Yes.
Pittsburgh, and it started at, what was it, 4:30 in the morning or 5? And it ran till 2:30 in the past midnight.
Is there
Can you imagine?
Every half hour.
And every half hour, you could set your clock, your watch on the time that the trolley had gone by, or the interurban. And one thing nice, do you remember the seats on the ones going way back? They were like custom fitted. They were
Oh,
bucket
really?
seats, and they had a beautiful gold stripe right through, all through the upholstery, you know, similar to this. And man, you could just sit there, and if you
You really
relaxed
rocked.
yourself, you'd be going like
Really,
this, you
that
know.
streetcar really rocked.
And some people that were not familiar with streetcars, they'd be holding on like as if it was going to fly. And they,
George, another thing is, don't forget they had the other line going to Charleroy.
Yeah.
exactly,
See,
right.
they one to Washington, one to Charleroy. It was
Right.
the best transportation
Yeah.
and
It
the
was.
fastest.
It went all the way to Mount Essen, by the way.
That their streetcar could go from Pittsburgh South Hills Junction to Washington in 1 hour.
Exactly.
Because my cousin, he worked on the railroad for so many years, you know.
It was a
And
very,
they kept those rails in very good shape.
yes. So it was unfortunate that they discarded the system. I think it was 52
In 52.
or so. And
Why did they? Do you have any idea?
well, the idea of the buses came into effect. And,
Well, they started getting more automobiles on the road.
right,
Yeah.
and automobiles, right.
Then a bus company says that they'll give you better transportation more often, and then after they got in, then there wasn't hardly any transportation.
Then we got cut off. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Then
Where
people-
was the stop then? It was right by the nursing home?
Yeah,
For Peters?
yeah, one-
that was the Snodgrass stop.
That was
Yeah,
Snodgrass
but-
stop out
Then
there.
there
A short
was
distance, there was the
one at the bottom of our hill that they called
Cheeseman.
Cheeseman.
stop.
And there was
Oh, there was
stops
just every so.
very close
Yeah.
together.
Were the stops named after families that lived in the area?
Yes,
Farms.
Yeah.
the farms.
Farms.
uh-huh.
And where that Krebs is, that's where it's.
That was the
was
right
all,
of way.
all the right of way
What
was
Krebs-
where Krebs was.
Krebs
Yeah.
business sets
Yeah,
right on the
Krebs.
former right of way, right.
Oh,
What
So-
you didn't mention was there used to be a toilet on those interurban.
Yeah.
Oh,
paths,
yes,
too.
right, that's, forgot that, right.
Right. For those long rides.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, speaking of trolleys, what about the area where it is now the Arrowhead Trail?
Well, I live
That
right
was a
alongside
train.
Oh,
that
That was a
Arrowhead
train.
Trail, and see, there's a hillside there. And I used to always grow vegetables and that along here. And this one year, I was growing pumpkins. And this one pumpkin got so big, it broke off the vine and rolled on the railroad track. And these engineers from the Montour Railroad come out and they looked at that pumpkin, they shook their head and they says, too big to move, so they cut a tunnel through it.
that's really a big one. More than a,
I thought I couldn't take that one.
I'm glad you did.
That's the reason I came.
Just so you could tell that story.
He told me that story before, and I believed it. That's the problem. But do you? How long did that train run then?
Oh, it was a long time.
Well,
It
they'd
was
say they
there.
called
It was still there in 50 when I
Montour
worked at the
Hill
telephone
Station, they call it Lawrence and Hill Station.
That was
They
Montour
hauled the
7.
coal from there to the library.
And Montour 4.
Oh,
His
okay.
library was 7. Montour 4 was in Hill Station.
Well, where the bike and hike shop is, there used to be a railway. Well, Mr.
Yeah.
McMurray, you could go there and get your fertilizer and everything, and it was a place where, like a warehouse.
There was a Dan's Lumber Company right there too.
right.
Yeah. Well, and then across the road from there was an old mill,
Now, where would that be? Let me just
right
think.
along the creek, right where the old mill stream,
Okay,
that
where the
building is
little
there.
shopping
Mhm.
building is.
Yeah, there
Okay.
used to be an old mill there for years.
Flour?
No,
That
feed.
was Will
feed mill.
McMurray.
Feed.
Will McMurray had that mill. And I remember my dad, we always had chickens. Never a lot, but we always had chickens. And my dad always got his feed down there from Will
That's
McMurray.
where we got it too.
Oh my goodness. Are there any
Only
other?
we had a lot. We had a lot of
Yeah.
chickens.
I think everybody had chickens.
Yeah. Every time you got sick, they give you a chicken. They go out and kill a chicken to get sick.
Was it Hoover that promised a chicken in every pot and
Yeah.
car
in every garage.
Alice, do you recall whenever 19 went from West McMurray Road straight through to Pittsburgh, and right there where the present 19 is at, that used to be where the big barn was at, right? You mind?
Well, McMurray Road did wind around and go in to Pittsburgh eventually, but
Yeah.
that was never called 19.
Oh, it wasn't?
No.
Yeah,
Oh, I
it was
see.
McMurray Road was
That was
called
still
Route
McMurray
19.
Road.
Was it?
Mhm. It was Route 19.
Oh, I
McMurray.
didn't realize
Yeah.
it was.
I think it was. And see, when
We
they,
always called it McMurray Road.
Yeah, well,
Well, instead,
it was Route
where
19 then.
they closed off that road there where they made that new thing to go into from Waterdam Road. Well, that's where McMurray Road used to go,
Through
around
that
that
area.
way, and then
Galley
on,
Road.
Galley
Yeah,
Road
that
was
was-
the old road.
oh,
That was the
Yeah.
old road.
but at
That
any
was
rate,
part of the old road to Washington,
Mhm.
and it was Route 19.
Then it went up to Thompsonville where the school is somehow.
It
Well,
went-
we still have part of that old 19 up around Thompsonville. Isn't that part of the old
No,
19?
19 didn't
No.
go through Thompsonville.
Oh.
That was,
Yeah.
That was Old
that was
Washington.
Washington Road.
It wasn't
Yeah.
19.
No.
so
See
when
that-
pardon me, when that was established as Route 19, and as it crossed over, not shortly after the barn was removed, you know, that barn set right directly on that, probably on what we call 19, didn't it?
Pretty close
Pretty
there,
close.
yes.
But anyway, when it crossed over on Cheeseman's place, for the trolley was still running, and they had a metal grill type of a floor, and every time a car or a truck went by, remember,
This-
it would go across that road and it'd go woo, 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 woo. And can you imagine all that coming and going? And well, some of them called it a singing bridge, but I'd say it was more like a whale.
Oh my
And it would
goodness.
drift all the way to Brown Acres. You could hear it that much.
We'd go up Brown Acres to pick berries, and we could hear this
Yeah.
wailing, you know, this bridge.
I don't know where Brown Acres is.
Well,
Oh,
that was
that's,
further down, like where Center Church Road is at, and you went up the hill, and they were on, that was vacant land at that time, and Brown Acres is right to the, on the right side of the road.
Yeah, where the
Going up to the
cemetery is
Presbyterian
part, you know,
Church.
right next to Cheeseman's
Yeah.
farm was Brown Acres.
Yeah, right next to it.
And wasn't that right?
Yeah.
Right near Center Presbyterian Church?
Yes,
is-
uh-huh.
Okay.
Going up
Well,
that.
we call Brown Acres too, up on the Gillespie farm. And that's there by the, I think it's a mobile station on 19, across from Krebs's, when you start up in there.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
on both
Yeah,
sides.
they were
That
on
was
both
called
sides
Brown
of the
Acres, too.
road,
Oh, my
on
goodness.
what you call 19.
Okay.
So after that was developed, and then Cheeseman eventually sold the property, much to the distress of the residents, to the cemetery, and then, so what are you going to do? That was prime land too. There was a lawsuit over that, but the residents lost on that.
I'll bet you've seen a lot of beautiful prime farmland
Going up ways.
turned into housing developments, and I'm just trying to think of some of the current housing areas. I live in Giant Oaks. Now, what was that area?
All woods.
That was all
All
woods.
woods.
We pick berries up there.
Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, Orchard Highlands over here, when I was younger, we'd come down Just About Road, and you'd look across there, and all these apple trees, and in the spring they were all, you know, full of bloom, and it was beautiful. And we always said that, well, Adam and Eve took over after the apple trees went down.
Mr. German owned that,
Yeah.
and he was the president of Montour Railroad for quite a few years. I don't know how many years, but I worked in there for 27 months in the Oliver Building in Pittsburgh. And but I know Mr. German had waited something like 21 years to secure that piece of property, and he had a worker. His name was Peter. I don't know his last name, but I mean his name was Peter, and Peter did most of the work. But he was a, you know, a city farmer.
I think that's what I would be if I was.
City farm.
I've always wanted to be one.
They had out there where the water dam plaza, that used to be a big pump here.
Yeah.
And they took all that stone out of there and they used it to build Route 79. And then see how much money somebody made there. They used all that
It
big
was all a big
pump,
pile
they
of
took all
stuff.
that there.
Natural I mean, like a hillside.
Well, they just look right, and that's where they leveled that off, and then they put the water dam plaza in there.
Is that right? Well, let's talk about some of these. Speaking of water dam plaza, I'm thinking of Donaldson's Crossroads. I'd love to hear some history behind that. What used to be there? Alice, I'm going to ask you because you grew up right there.
You mean where the shopping center
Right.
is? That was farmland. It was open fields. And I have a small picture that when they were widening 19, showing that there was nothing there. And there were 2 homes that they moved, and they're located over across from the fire hall on East McMurray Road. They moved them over the hill. Uh-huh. And,
That was a big thing whenever they moved
yes.
those 2 houses. Everybody
Which
said they're going to
houses
fall
are they?
apart.
Now, let's see.
well, they've added on to both of them,
Yeah.
but they're the 2 directly across
Directly-
from the
okay.
Peters Township Fire Hall at the crossroads.
Oh my goodness.
They took them over the hill, but they were on what was the road to Washington there. And there was absolutely nothing in there. The McDowell farm and open fields.
My goodness.
So
Oh, when did shopping start there?
the shopping center went in I would-
1960.
60s.
60s, I think.
60s.
I would
60.
say 63, 64.
Was Loblaws there at the corner?
Oh,
before?
Loblaws
Loblaws
was
was
the
over on the other
first-
side.
one.
Was our first
Right across from
really
you.
big store.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was where?
Where the
Right across,
First South is now.
Percentage
Yeah.
carpeting.
Presents.
And
Yes.
before that, there used to be a big nightclub here.
Hollywood.
Oh,
Right.
Hollywood
Oh, the Hollywood
barbecue.
barbecue.
Yes.
The Hollywood that just
There were
I have a
2. There were
picture.
2.
today, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
No, well,
Or is
it
this a
was
different Hollywood?
originally, yes.
It was originally
over
on
on
the
the
other
other
side.
corner where Present Carpet was.
Yeah, down closer to the
And
road. Hmm.
Is that right?
Yes.
That was the Hollywood barbecue,
Show
and
her
then when they moved it over, it became the Hollywood.
They moved that building, or they built a new
If
building?
you'd have seen that building, it couldn't have been moved.
Oh, really?
Well, there was a smaller Hollywood, the restaurant. I think later on they called Hollywood, but actually it was a little white little cottage like. It was a small
Yes, I
restaurant.
know. Here's a picture of it. It's so
Now
tiny.
this is,
This is the old
That's the old
Hollywood.
Hollywood, before they added on to it.
We're
oh my goodness,
It was just a small place.
isn't that something?
This is where, this is the 2 houses, and this is where the shopping center went in.
Excuse me. Oh, when they were grading it?
No, that's when they were grading 19
Oh,
to make
well, 19.
19 wider.
Oh, I
You know,
see.
That's
I
where they
see.
took the 2 houses from.
What kind of a road was 19?
It was a concrete road, 2 lanes, before they widened it and made it.
2 lanes all the way to Washington, and you always got hung up behind a truck on a couple of the hills into Washington before they widened it.
Now, do you have any idea why shopping centralized at that area as compared to, say, the Dairy Bar area?
Probably on account of the highway going through.
Well, and
There.
there was always a store at the crossroads. I have a picture of it. It
Oh, I'm glad you brought your picture.
doesn't, that one she might be able to pick up. That's what the crossroads looked like until 1940. And
Standard Oil.
then that was a restaurant and a service station. And 1940, 19 went down past our house then. And that's when it changed, and it changed to this. And this is a picture of before the bank building. This is what it looked like after. And you can see the Hollywood barbecue there, but it was named Pal's Restaurant then.
Oh, gosh.
There's been a lot of changes.
A lot.
Up around your way.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now,
A lot of
around
change.
here, there hasn't been too many changes. We've remained pretty much
It's still
the
country,
same.
but there's a lot of
But
houses
a lot of
and
houses
things
have been
going
built
in.
up on Snyder Road and that, but right in through here, it was always that the houses were more centrally located and the ground was all behind. And that, so that's the way it was built then or something.
And we
But,
are on just about right now, correct?
Yes.
And this, the road right here is
the one
Snyder?
going up this way is, I'm on, right on the corner of Snyder and just about.
This is still very beautiful farmland out here.
Well, I remember when we were first married, we lived where my son lives, just down the road there. Was another house on the farm here. And how many times Chess used to have to get the tractor out to pull people out because there was always a bog right by a tree there. Everybody got stuck every time. All hours of the night we have to go and pull people out because they'd get stuck.
Can we go back to school?
We surely can. Let's go.
At one time, the Peters Township School District had 3 buses. There was Mr. Bartram, Raymond Baird, and Doc Townsend. Doc Townsend's father, Listy Townsend. And each bus made 2 trips a day. Now, I didn't travel on a school bus after we moved to McMurray because I could walk. But such a far cry from the fleet of buses we have today.
There's so many.
Yeah.
But I'm even thinking, just with that few number, Peters Township covers such a
Large area.
large area. Now,
Well,
did
Well,
the,
we had the Venetia school, so
We
the
had the
people
Venetia
down at that
school.
end there, they went to the Venetia school. And
through
then,
high school? Or
Oh, no, 8th grade.
Through 8th grade.
Yeah, it was through 8th grade, and then they lowered it through the 6th grade. And then I think finally when one of our younger sons was in school, it went through the 3rd grade. And 4th grade they came over to McMurray Elementary. But I think I look at all this fleet of buses as it's out here at the school on an average day and think about the 3 school buses we had.
Isn't it something?
Well, speaking of school buses, whenever my son, both my children, had the same bus driver that I had when I went to school.
Who was that?
Mr. Bartram.
Okay.
And my son down to the school, to the ring we used to get on right down here by the road. And Mr. Bartram says, "Well, Irma, you going too?"
Oh, gosh. Oh, how fascinating.
Well, the same
Also-
thing happened with our kids had the same,
Same bus
driver
driver.
that
Mhm.
Harold had had in school. So,
And if you didn't behave on the bus,
Uh-huh.
the bus driver just stopped and put you off, and you walked from wherever he
You
put
went.
you off.
Is that
No
right?
questions asked, and the parents took it too. I mean, you
They stood by
usually
the
got
bus
a paddling
driver.
when you got home that you didn't
Yeah.
behave.
Gosh.
There was no questions asked.
Would a
My
lot, would a lot of kids walk a long distance,
No.
or everybody did take the
You-
bus? I always heard stories my mother said, but well, I walked miles and miles to school.
I never walked very far, just down the end of the
No.
block here.
I don't know that.
my mother-in-law used to tell the story about old Mr. Townsend stopping the school bus and coming up and telling her, "Mrs. Webster, that young Donley of yours did this or that." His name was Donald, but that didn't matter to Mr. Townsend. He was that young Donley.
Our children had to walk all the way up to Pleasant Avenue. The school board decided that they was making a walkway from way up on top of the hill,
Marion Drive.
Marion Drive, to the school. And what we objected to primarily is because Pleasant Avenue wasn't accepted as a Peters Township road. We actually had to maintain that for a full 20 years.
Oh my goodness.
We even had hired Mr. Heatrick, remember, with a grader to make it look presentable, red dog and all. Or we went out there with us, if there was a hole, we went out there with a shovel and we filled it in. So at that time we were already getting angry at the school board. So when they had a meeting, we had mentioned to them, I says, which one of you gentlemen took the trouble to walk that walkway and down what eventually connected to Pleasant Avenue? There's a big gully right in the center. Man, they didn't even say a word. I probably overdid the lecture, but it came to their senses, and they finally stated that they would bust the kids in. But it was annoying that.
Took a pretty long fight, George, with us.
Well, yes, but
we were wrangling for a couple months.
I guess they
So
probably
still
felt
bored.
they had enough of that guy.
You made enough nuisance, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, gosh. Well, let's change the subject a little bit. I work with senior citizens, and I also work with teenagers in the township. And I would be real interested to hear what teenagers did for social recreation or for any type of entertainment, dating practices or anything like that. Do you recall?
Well, we had dances.
Yeah, we had
We had dances
dances.
over
We
at the
had
school.
basketball.
Well, we had basketball. Yes.
That was a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have football.
No, we didn't have a big enough school for football.
Well, with our four boys, you'd think you'd have trouble, but once they got it in their head that we had bought an old antique Ford, what was it, 36, so we had to fix it up naturally to make it run. And then we were working in a machinist and a maintenance kind of a trade at a steel plant. We had all the tools, the wrenches, and you name it, as you would accumulate through the years. So naturally they got used to helping to work on the cars. And after they went through from one car to the other, BMWs and a whole lot of them, you know, we didn't have no trouble with the kids at all, did we?
We didn't have no dope or...
No, they were always as busy with those junkers, as they called them.
Did they? I bet probably were quite creative as far as their entertainment went.
Yeah, you had to. They played ball in any empty fields, and
You made your recreation.
Yes, on your
And,
own.
we did have a canteen at the school my senior year on Saturday evenings.
Now,
And
what was that?
it was a place where you could go and dance and play games, and sort of like this cellar that they have now. It was in the auditorium of the school, and you could bring a friend, but outsiders couldn't get in, you know, just drop in. And you had to stay in there the whole time you were there until you went home. And I think really not too many people had driver's license when I was a senior. So parents had to bring you, or you had to catch a bus to go there. And many a times I rode home with Mr. Day, the principal, because he would be going past the crossroads. And we did have 2 movie theaters in Canonsburg.
Really?
And that was, you could take the bus in there and go to the movie and come back home. So that was entertainment.
Oh, absolutely.
That was our Saturday.
That was
Saturday
Saturday.
was
Everybody
Saturday.
went to Canonsburg on
Is that
Saturday
right?
night.
The stores
that's-
were up until 9, and
Right, right. I'll remember
Canonsburg
that.
was
families.
really a booming town. I mean,
Yes,
you had nice
was.
dress shops and 2 5 and 10s, and so it was really a handy place to go.
Well, that was probably where most of the shopping was done then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
well, you could take the trolley
Yeah,
to.
right.
It would leave you off in front of Kaufman's and Gimbel's. So
Downtown.
I used to do a lot of shopping in, you know, the bargain stores. They used to call them basement, and I'd go there once a month or something like that and shop after I moved to Peters Township for our children's clothes.
Mm-hmm. Did you make many trips to Washington, or was that too far away?
No,
No, it was closer, but we went there for dog tags and pay taxes and stuff like that.
What about Pittsburgh? Was that
occasion.
special.
That was special.
special?
That was
That's special
special.
trips.
Absolutely.
And once you worked down there, then it wasn't too special anymore.
It lost its luster.
Specialty.
Did you take the trolley in to work?
No, I took Blue Ridge bus.
Oh, I see.
At that time. Well, I had started to work down at the McMurray telephone office, and I was perfectly happy to be able to walk to work every day, even though I wasn't making much money. And one morning I walked up to my dad's service station, and Mr. German, again, was up there, and I met him for the first time. And a couple of weeks later, Dad come home and he said, Mr. German said he has a job for you in Pittsburgh if you want to go in and see about it. Well, why should I travel to Pittsburgh when I could walk down to McMurray? So finally Dad persuaded me, and I went in and I saw about it. They offered me $75 a month, and that was a real mint after
Yes.
getting about $25 a month down,
Yes.
down McMurray if I made it that much. But so then I started working in Pittsburgh.
My goodness. Well, tell me about this telephone office.
Well, Mr. Joe McMurray built the office for Bell Telephone at the time, and well, they used a whole building. It was a whole building.
Now,
It was
that
the
building was the building that is now,
Yeah. They have a theory
the
delight.
hairdresser.
Yes,
area,
and-
like in a beauty shop.
Okay.
Irma, there was an apartment in there.
Was there an apartment in there?
Mhm. Grace Douglas lived
That's
in that
right.
apartment.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, not
Mhm.
when I worked there.
Yeah, but whenever I
They
was
went,
working there.
yeah, and then they took it over all
Mm-hmm.
of it then.
Yeah.
Because
That
my
was-
sister worked down there. And,
It's been the popular place to work.
How
the
I
only
got
place to work.
that was a career choice. When
Mhm.
I was a senior, they took seniors that weren't planning on going to college to the pottery in Canonsburg, to the telephone company down in McMurray, and you went in and saw, you know, what they did, and that was one of your career choices. And I applied to work in Canonsburg because McMurray didn't need an operator, but then they did need one, and I got on down there, and that's where I worked.
Well, when we went to school, we didn't have the business and the academic
No.
courses. We just had a straight academic course. So
Home
you
ec.
either went to college or you went to work.
They had a
You know,
Or
we
you
had
got married.
or got married.
well, we had a home ec course, and one of the periods, I had 2 periods of home ec, and one period I cooked for the cafeteria. You didn't get paid for it. That was your learning experience.
Is that right?
Yes.
And that was the way the kids
That's
ate
how-
because
Yes,
of
the
the home ec.
cafeteria was very tiny, but we made soup and pudding and chocolate milk because it didn't come in containers then, and that was our
And apparently you met every day then.
yes.
home ec.
Oh yeah.
You got cheated because I got paid when I worked.
No,
in
we
there.
did.
We were under that NYA program, National Youth Association. We got $4.50 a month.
Oh.
Wow.
But you had to
Hey.
have, you had to have
Well.
2 study periods, one before and one
Yes.
right after
They-
lunch. And we prepared the meals, and we had to be there during the lunch period. And then, well, there was always 2 lunch periods, one for the elementary school and one for the high school. And then afterwards, while you were cleaning up in there. But this was, this had to do with your dad's income or something.
That was
I
that
don't
$4.50 or?
$4.
I
a
didn't
month.
think it was
A month.
$4.50. You said $4.50.
$4.50.
Well, they did have a girl that did the dishes because there
Uh-huh.
were no dishwashers, and she got paid, but she had to give up her lunch period, and she had a study hall afterwards to do the dishes of the cafeteria.
Now, when things got a little better, perhaps, I worked in the McCrory's 5 and 10 in Canonsburg during the Christmas season, you know, from November, Thanksgiving and on. Well, they paid you a generous sum of $5 a week. However, there was no such thing as a 40-hour week. We had to be there from 8 o'clock or even earlier, because it opened at 8. And we were still there usually till 9:30 in the evening, can you imagine? With, we brought our own lunch. And then even so, I remember the owner, or the one that was managing the store, McCrory's, was across the street from the present one in Canonsburg, and he was sort of grumbling that we wasn't hustling enough. This included baling paper boxes, you know, after they were crushed, and handling stock, sweeping the sidewalks, and even doing the mopping in front of the entrances, you know. So for $5 a week, that was supposedly, of course, I'd beat that $4.50 a month. All of $20
That
for
was a
40.
government check we received.
Oh, I
It was
see.
$4.50 a month.
I worked for that when I was in high school, and I had to do the windows in the high school and correct papers, and when I had to do the windows, I was so embarrassed that I was washing windows. You know, in the school, I had to go on Saturday to wash windows. But I liked the correct papers. But when it came to washing windows, I didn't want nobody to see me washing windows.
Oh, gosh.
One thing that I didn't like about McCrory's, though, and I never done that would ever happen, they, in their candy section, you know, they had screens, of course, but once you had mice in there, forget it. And they would crawl in amongst the chocolates and so on, and they'd leave their droppings all over the place. And lo and behold, here I thought he was going to discard the whole caboodle. He says, no, he said, you can't throw those away. Pick out the good ones, put them in the new boxes, and discard the rest. And I thought to myself, holy mackerel, I told everybody, don't you dare buy any edibles in the 5 and 10 at that time. And this is an absolute fact.
And they looked so good behind that glass. Everybody wanted them.
Yeah.
I said a sweet tooth also.
Well,
My first job was at a cleaner's. I was a relief girl in the afternoon, and I got $4 a week. And out of that, I paid for my transportation and everything. And then I was that for 2 weeks, and then I was promoted to manager. And I got $16 a week, and I thought, oh boy, you know, that's great. So then I went to night school with what I was making, and then from there I went to Bell Telephone and worked there. So.
Oh, that's interesting. I was told by one of our senior citizens about Peters Township Fair.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to hear about that,
Yeah,
if you can recall anything.
That was held over at the high
High
school
school.
every summer. I believe it was in August.
Somewhere around there.
It was held over in at the high school. And I think the farm women were pretty much behind it, having it organized or started or something. And they had quilt judging, and they had farm produce and pies and cakes and jellies and all of this.
And chickens and all that stuff.
Yeah, and then later they started having horses. They had,
Judah bagging contest too.
yeah,
You remember that one?
but they would have, like, I know they'd sell raffle tickets to defray some of the cost of it. And my mother won a quilt that was raffled off. I have that quilt today, and it's a beautiful quilt. And I wish I knew who had made it, but I don't. And later, when they built the elementary school, they had a cooking program as part of the fair. They had a cooking program down in the all-purpose room of the cafeteria, I believe, in the elementary school. And that was the very first time I ever saw a microwave. And they did a hot dog in something like 2 minutes or something. I don't remember the amount of time. And was later, it was down at the Scout
Down
Cabin.
behind, no, it was behind the, where the library is. It was in
Yeah.
where they're
But-
playing ball now
Oh,
and
the
everything.
field.
It was
Much of
on
the
there.
displays were in the Scout Cabin.
Yeah, in the Scout Cabin, which
I remember
my
they had
father
these
helped
quilts
build.
over the upper level in the Scout Cabin. But it was an interesting, and well, it was just an interesting time of the.
Well, at
When
these
did that
fairs-
fair stop?
I don't remember when.
I didn't keep a record of that, mental or otherwise.
You mentioned the scout building, or cabin,
Yeah.
and Erma, you said your father
Help
Help.
build.
helped build it?
Well, the people, the men in the neighborhood, I mean, right around the neighborhood have built it.
Now that was the log cabin, that
cabin.
sat down below the municipal parking lot?
Right.
Okay.
That,
That isn't there anymore.
No.
no, Bill McMurray
Bill-
owned the property, and the Scout building was built on his part. I guess
It was donated to the Scouts.
Yeah, and the insurance upkeep of it was,
Getting
it
too
needed
high.
so much repairs and everything. I guess they just figured it wasn't worth it. But it was relocated from somewhere else down there.
It was moved up from where it is, where it was down further. And then they moved it up closer to where the library is. I mean,
I didn't remember the story behind where the scout cabin actually came from.
it was in the same area there when it was moved up a little bit.
Now, is that the same group that is now, has a building next to Trinity Methodist Church? There's
I
a
don't
scout building
think-
up there.
It
is
wasn't
it?
the same
I know.
troop, I don't think.
I don't know.
They used to play bingo at the crossroads.
Yeah, we had a fireman's fair every year at the crossroads when they were a young and struggling fire company, and everyone worked at it,
Oh.
wives and husbands. And we had that for years and years.
Now, is that the same type of thing with the produce and the?
No, it was more of a
Carnival,
carnival fair.
thing,
You know, we had bingo and we had food booths, and the firemen showed their apparatus, you know, and demonstrated it. And but it was a thing that we had every year.
Which,
And that was on the field there where the shopping center is, or where Vitty's and the Pizza Hut. You went in there.
oh, okay. Now that just brings to mind the fire hall. That was not where it is now.
No, it
Yeah.
was at the
No.
crossroads
It was
too.
at the crossroads.
It was
there.
at the crossroads.
It's
It was,
agency near a real station
yeah.
at F&B.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
area
that's
now.
where it was down, they had it down in the basement like.
Actually, the first one was just a little garage behind that big barn I showed you, and that was the first little fire hall. And they had one little truck, and then they built the foundation and went on from there.
It never got to be beyond the foundation stage,
No.
did it?
No, we
Right.
stayed there for
No.
years.
Well,
They
there
still
was,
held all kinds of activities.
Oh, we
there.
had dances in that foundation, square
Oh,
dances.
really?
Square dancing was a big thing then.
Yes.
And that was a lot of the activities at school too.
Mhm.
The junior and senior class could sponsor a square dance, and we did.
Well, why don't we jump up to the present? I mean, my
Well, I
mind
have
is.
one more thing
Oh,
before we
okay,
go on.
sure.
The bridge
Yes.
down there by the dairy bar. When we first moved here, it was just a wooden bridge. And they made this big cement bridge. And my father remarked that, where are we going to get all the cars to go across that?
Oh!
We only knew.
I only knew, right.
Oh my goodness.
When are they gonna put a signal lighting down there?
I don't know.
they're talking about it.
Are they still
Yeah,
talking?
they did talk about it, yeah.
From a little wooden bridge to a
bridge,
signal.
yeah.
All this progress. Well, here we are at Peters Township in 1990. I've lived in the area for 20 years and I've seen so much change, but thinking of the things that you're talking about is mind-boggling. But could you reflect on what you think of the present compared to the past? The positive as well as the negative? Any thoughts on?
Well, with inflation, I tell you, it's gonna be rough living.
Well, I'm hoping that the youngsters really take heed, and they have the coming years to contend with, not like some of us, like myself I'm talking about. And what they don't realize, if they don't conserve with the trees and the natural resources, I shudder to think what the future might hold. And I'm hoping that each one of them, living in a country as great as the United States is, or should I say was, I don't know, they should take heed that to preserve their country and as citizens of the country, make sure that they maintain try to maintain the air quality, the trees, all the things that nature has been supplying us through the years. Naturally, God is the creator of all, and that's where we got the nature. But one thing I have to say about when we bought the lot over there on Pleasant Avenue, there's, I think, 4 little spindly maples that the previous people planted. Well, I often must have been, it had to be trees and more trees, you know. Now you can't really see the house if you come up Pleasant Avenue. Oh yes, there's a house behind there, you know. But we really love the shrubbery, and unfortunately things can get out of hand, you know.
He won't kill anything that's living.
Matter of fact, there was a benefit because it cut down on the noise from the singing or wailing bridge, you know. And even now, you can't hear so much of the highway even 200 feet up from it. And the trees must act as a barrier.
They do.
And they convert our, when we exhaust our air from our bodies, and as I understand it, the leaves pull that in and create the oxygen.
That's right.
So that's where the trees come in, and I hope they do not ruin the planet before it's too late.
Like these contractors, whenever they build these plans of homes and that, right away they come in and level everything.
level
Yes,
down.
we're well
And how
on our
long it
way in
takes.
Peters Township.
And how long it takes for a tree to grow if they'd only stop to think
Yes.
and that what they are doing.
With a chainsaw, they can cut them down in no time.
That's right.
That's true.
Well, what do you think about all the growth in the building that's going on in Peters?
I don't like it. I think there's too much growth, you know, too many buildings, and we're going to look like Monroeville. If you go into Monroeville, you don't see a pleasant sight. You see too many business places.
All shopping centers.
And I think Peters Township should stay more rural than, you know, it's okay like in Giant Oaks and everything, but you probably will never get any shopping centers, although the homes that are built next to the shopping center, they're beautiful homes, and if they put a shopping center where they're talking about now, those people are going to just be looking at roofs with air conditioners on. That ain't going to be so nice. If you look, you know, from the hilltop, you know, where that all those new homes are,
It's close to Giant Oaks.
and they're
the section.
talking about putting a shopping center
Yes,
where
they
that
are.
farmer, McDowell,
McDowell's.
yeah, that's going to be terrible for those people that have those beautiful homes to be looking down on roofs and.
Any other thoughts?
It was always a nice view when we went past McDowell's farm there, and they seen all them sheep out there.
Yes,
Yes.
and the barn and the home, yes.
My
uh-huh.
children miss that. We used to drive over there every spring and see the
Little lambs.
little
I always like them
lambs.
black ones.
Okay. Well, are there any other thoughts? Any words of wisdom? You're full of wisdom, I'm sure.
Well, don't forget our commercial pay. You'll hear from my attorney.